The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I'm in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. What a crazy start to Survivor pools this season. We had the top favorite in week 1 go down, the top favorite in week 2 go down, and then absolute carnage last week in week 3.
Yeah, 95.5% of the Circa Survivor entries are already out. Just nuts. But let's jump into the episode here. And we are starting off with the free bet of the week. And last week, we had over 40.5 in the Broncos and Bucks game. And despite scoring 27 points in the first half, the Bucks didn't really help us out. Couldn't get on the board much. So we are now 7-3-1, dating back to last year. But what do you have for us this week?
This week, I've got Bengals -4, 4.5. I don't know what this number is going to be when you're watching the show because we're about to release that as a strong opinion to clients in about an hour as we sit here on Thursday morning. But I do think it's good to 4.5. So only 2% of teams in the Super Bowl era have started 0-3 and made the playoffs. But I think the Bengals can buck that trend. We have an extra game now as well as an extra playoff spot. And Cincinnati is a top 10 team by our metrics with a below average remaining strength of schedule.
Yeah, you'd released Panthers +6.5 and the over after hearing that Bryce Young got benched. So what'd you take away from Andy Dalton's first start?
Well, I mean, Dalton was slinging it. He had 5 completions with 10-plus air yards last week. That was as many as Bryce Young had in the first 2 games combined. Dalton averaged .34 EPA per play, which was higher than any start in Bryce Young's career. So the Panthers clearly made the right decision at quarterback. But I think the market has gone way too far with the Dalton love after they didn't adjust enough last week. So Dalton had a league-low 2.01 second time to throw against the Raiders, but he's not going to be able to get the ball out as quickly without top underneath target Adam Thielen, who's worth 0.4 points according to our metrics.
Yeah, and it also looks like they're going to be without a key piece on that offensive line.
Damian Lewis is going to miss some time, and he ranks 2nd in the NFL in pass blocking efficiency after the Panthers gave him that big deal in the offseason. And so you're like, okay, well, they don't have Thielen. They're going to be getting some extra pressure up the middle. Maybe they try and negate that with some screens to Chuba Hubbard. But Cincinnati's linebackers are excellent defending screens. The Bengals are conceding negative -0.28 EPA per target to opposing running backs this season.
All right, well, how's this matchup looking for the Bengals offense? I mean, I think people are overreacting a little bit based on how the first 3 weeks have gone.
I mean, the offense is not the problem for Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's offense averaged .43 EPA per play in week 3. That was second best among any team in the NFL. Fortunately for the Bengals, it was second best to the team they were playing, the Commanders. But this offense is humming with T. Higgins back on the field. And Higgins is going to be crucial in this game because either him or Jamar Chase is going to be lined up with a favorable matchup on every snap across from Carolina cornerback Mike Jackson, who's surrendering a league-high 2.24 yards per cover snap. So I think the Bengals have a top 5-ish offense. The defense is not going to be as bad as they were last week, and I think the Bengals should be favored by about 6 here on Sunday.
I love it. Well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying right now, Tan?
I'm buying Green Bay's offense stock. So all signs are pointing towards Jordan Love being back under center this week. And I think we're getting this Packers offense at a discount because everyone is scared of that Brian Flores defense.
Yeah, and Green Bay's offense has some pretty wonky numbers right now since they've had Malik Willis playing quarterback.
Yeah, but the one thing they've done well with either Love or Willis in the first 3 weeks is pass against disguised coverage. They're averaging .51 EPA per dropback versus disguised coverage, and that's extremely important this week because no team has disguised more coverage from single high to two high than the Vikings. That completely befuddled C.J. Stroud last week when only 39% of his passes went beyond the sticks. And I want you to go ahead and put up the Brett Coleman tweet right now because he's right. Brian Flores is playing like a Madden defense where he's taking away everything deep and counting on his opponent to get bored throwing the ball into the flat all day. But Matt LaFleur is not going to get bored. He loves throwing swing passes, and Jordan Love threw the 4th most screens in the NFL last season.
Yeah, and Flores' defense, his weakness is defending slot receivers. And nickelback Byron Murphy is surrendering a league-high 2.67 yards per cover snap in the slot.
So very favorable matchup there for Jaden Reed, who's 2nd in yards per route run in the slot.
I love it. Well, let's shift it over. And whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
I'm selling every offensive line in the NFC South. So we mentioned earlier, Carolina is going to be without Damian Lewis, who's second in pass blocking efficiency. New Orleans lost center Eric McCoy after 3 snaps against the Eagles. He's got a groin injury that's going to require surgery, and he'll be out. What they did there was they moved Lucas Patrick to center, and then Udo came in at left guard and surrendered a 15% pressure rate, filling in for McCoy.
Yeah, and it also looks like starting guard Cesar Ruiz is going to be sidelined this week as well.
Yeah, so then Derek Carr, he reverted back to the check down merchant we've seen from him in the past without the protection from the offensive line. He averages 6.5 air yards per attempt versus the Eagles compared to an 8.5 average depth of target in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and Atlanta's offensive line is also in trouble here with center Drew Dahlman's high ankle sprain from last week, and then they have right tackle Caleb McGarry's MCL sprain.
And McGarry is allowing a 5.7% career pressure rate compared to backup Storm Norton's surrendering an 8.3% career pressure rate. Norton, not really an NFL player. He hasn't been a consistent starter since 2021 when he ranked 49th in pass blocking efficiency out of 54 qualifying tackles. He's really going to struggle on Sunday across from edge defender Carl Granderson.
Yeah, well, Buccaneers get right tackle Luke Gadecki back this week, but you still think Baker Mayfield might have some protection problems?
I do, because the Buccaneers are so weak on the interior offensive line. Rookie center Graham Barton has surrendered 7 pressures so far, and Cody Mock has allowed 2 sacks in 3 games. I think Jalen Carter is going to eat again like we saw last Sunday.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the injury watch, and the Eagles have 3 brutal injuries on their offense, and I think the Saints might have had a bounty out for him last week.
I don't know about that. Actually, if you listen to the Michael Silver interview on Pardon My Take, he kind of thought that the Saints got a raw deal there because Goodell was feuding with Sean Payton at the time, and it might have my bounty gate might have been a hoax from the start. But anyways, back to the Eagles offense. It looks like they're going to have their 3 best players sidelined on Sunday with All-Pro right tackle Lane Johnson and Devonta Smith. Both have concussions, and then I don't think they're going to push A.J. Brown back to play this week on that hamstring because they have a bye in week 5. So Lane Johnson, best right tackle in the NFL. He's worth about 1.4 points because backup Fred Johnson is terrible. He surrendered a 16% pressure rate filling in last week. He'll struggle this week across from Yaya Diaby. And then I've got the Eagles wide receivers worth 2.4 points, so not quite as much as the Rams wide receivers, but still a huge cluster loss for Philly.
All right, well, the Chargers look like they might be in trouble heading into the weekend. I mean, Justin Herbert is a true 50-50 chance to play, and that's barely scratching the surface for their injuries.
Yeah, so star left tackle Rashawn Slater likely out. He was replaced at left tackle by Trey Pipkins, and then they put in Saylor at guard, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that this week with Pipkins a little bit banged up. Saylor can't really play tackle. And then Joe Alt is also probably out. Their other starting tackle, which would bring in Foster Sorrell to play tackle. He'll struggle tremendously across from George Karlaftis, who's 16th in pressure so far.
Yeah, so with Pipkins banged up, I mean, that's potentially 3 backups on the offensive line protecting your already banged up quarterback.
And it's not just the offense. The defense is got Joey Bosa likely out, and Derwin James is going to be suspended here. So all sorts of bad, all sorts of first-round picks out for the Chargers this week. So we'll see how they can hold up here against the Chiefs.
All right, well, let's look at the Dolphins QB situation because it has not been great. I mean, is it Tyler Huntley time or is it Skylar Thompson again? I mean, I'm really hoping it's not Skylar Thompson again.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. Skylar Thompson is not an NFL quarterback. But as we record this on Thursday, we really just don't have much clarity about what they're going to be doing for the signal caller this week. I think Miami would be best off going with Tyler Huntley, but that would completely change the dynamic of this offense. So we'll just have to see. You'll have to head to the website on Monday to see my final thoughts on this game.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the weather of the week, and what are you seeing out there, Tan?
I'm looking at the Sunday night game here. It's going to be wet and sticky in Baltimore, and scoring conditions look like they'll be about 3 points worse than average. So we could see a lot of ground game, running the football. Derrick Henry forced 12 missed tackles last week. That was the second most for any ball carrier this season. The Ravens' ground game is up to 4th in success rate, and the Bills have not been great in run defense. They're 27th in EPA per rush allowed there. With all the linebacker trouble they had. So I could see another big game for the Ravens running the football. Now, when they do pass, I like the Ravens tight ends here because we talked about this last week. The Bills run a ton of cover too. That's weakest in the seams. So we could see Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely have a big game in that area.
Those two going off would drive some more fantasy players insane trying to chase the Mark Andrews. But let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the DraftKings player of the slate, and who are you going with this week?
I'm going with Josh Downs all the way down at 4,600. So the Steelers are allowing a league low negative 0.29 EPA per rush, and the Colts will need Anthony Richardson to win this game through the air. He has a favorable matchup doing that because Richardson has been terrible against the blitz this year, only 0.2 yards per pass play, but he's 8.3 yards per pass play against a standard pass rush, and that's what the Steelers have been doing most often so far this season.
Yeah, and the Steelers rank 5th in pressure rate, but you think there's reason to believe that the Colts offensive line can limit them on Sunday?
I do, because the Colts' best offensive linemen are going against the Steelers' best pass rushers. Colts all-pro left guard Quentin Nelson is going to limit Cameron Hayward. And then you've got TJ Watt. You know, he's always something you got to worry about when you're playing the Steelers. But the Colts' right tackle, Braden Smith, has only conceded 4 pressures this season. And they don't have to worry about Alex Highsmith on the other edge because he's likely to miss multiple weeks with a groin injury.
Yeah, and wide receiver Josh Downs made his season debut last week, and Colts GM Chris Ballard said back in July that people don't talk about Downs, and he's about to explode this season.
Yeah, so I think Downs is finally getting back to full health here, and he's going to be open underneath against Steelers rookie nickelback Beanie Bishop. So I don't think a lot of people have the guts to play Josh Downs against the Steelers defense, but that's exactly why I'm targeting here in tournaments.
I love that one. Well, let's head it over to our Monday night primetime preview. We've got the Seahawks at the Lions, and the undefeated Seahawks have looked great so far this season, but I think this might be their first big test.
Yeah, and Geno Smith has been pressured on 14 dropbacks per game this season. I think it's likely to get worse on Monday night. So Lions edge rusher Aiden Hutchinson has 25 pressures this season. That is 7 more than any other player. And you're like, wow, he's completely dominating. Well, he's gone against exclusively backup and third string tackles all year. So that's going to regress, but not this week because he's getting another third string tackle. Stone Forsythe ranks 43rd in pass blocking efficiency out of 56 qualifiers for the Seahawks.
All right, well, with no time to throw, what should we expect the Seahawks offense to look like?
Well, he's going to have to try and get the ball out fast, but I think Detroit's defense can contain the underneath routes to Jackson Smith and Jigba because Lions nickelback Amik Robertson is 7th in yards per cover snap allowed from the slot. And then they're also getting back Alex Anzalone this week, the Lions are, and he leads linebackers with a 63% separation prevented rate. So now you're looking at that. It's like, okay, he's going to be taking away the underneath routes along with Robertson. Can they get the screen game going? I'm not really sure because Detroit's defense is 7th in EPA per target allowed to opposing running backs.
Yeah, and Charbonnet is also probably not going to get much going on the ground because the Lions rank 3rd in EPA per rush allowed. So if those two have bad matchups, how are they really going to find success this week?
I think the game comes down to whether Geno can connect on some deep shots to DK Metcalf. Metcalf is going to be going against Carlton Davis, who has not had a good season so far just based off the yardage that he's given up. But, you know, he uses kind of a boomer bust, handsy approach, and he might not surrender as many yards as he has going forward because Davis had a 69% separation prevented rate last week. That was 8th best among cornerbacks. And I think if he can get his hands on DK Metcalf and frustrate him, it could be a good matchup for Carlton Davis to finally have a good game. But also, you know, if he stumbles there, DK Metcalf can easily get behind any cornerback in the NFL.
Well, let's look at some of the injuries for this game because both these teams are a little banged up.
Yeah, Detroit center Frank Ragnow ranked 6th in pass blocking efficiency last year. Looks like he's going to be sidelined. He played through some injuries last year, though, so you can never count him out. But then on the other side of the ball, guys that would have normally lining across from Ragnow are also going to be out. The Seahawks could be without both starting interior defenders. Leonard Williams ranks 3rd in pass rushing efficiency, and rookie Byron Murphy ranks 11th in pass rushing efficiency. So that's going to be a big loss for the Seahawks. Lions defense not safe because it looks like Brian Branch is going to be out with a concussion. He's worth a half point. And then Sam Laporta is also worth a half point for the Lions. Their tight end ranked 5th in yards per route run in 2023.
All right, so after counting all these injuries, where does your model come out on this game?
We've got Detroit as a 4.4 point favorite with a predicted total of 49.0.
All right, so it doesn't look like there's too much value on the side or total, but we do have a primetime prop, and you are 16-8 dating back to last season after Christian Kirk popped off for 79 yards last week. So what do you have for us going into this week?
I've got Tim Patrick over 13.5 receiving yards. So I do think Jared Goff is going to be kept clean with the Seahawks interior defenders banged up and Boye Mafe shut down by Penei Sewell. So I expect Goff to throw for at least 225 yards here on Monday night, but his top wide receiver targets could struggle based off the matchups. You've got Tariq Woolen, who ranks 4th in yards per cover snap allowed, containing Jamison Williams. He's got the speed certainly to take away Williams' deep routes. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot going against one of the best nickelbacks in the NFL in Devin Witherspoon. Tight end Sam Laporta is banged up, like we mentioned earlier. So Goff's going to have to look somewhere, and I think Tim Patrick is that guy.
Yeah, and add to that, Patrick didn't play in week 1 because the Lions had just signed him a week earlier, but he's ran 34 routes in the last 2 weeks, and he's trending for even more routes going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that will do it for our week 4 preview. So make sure to head over to drbobsports.com. You can check out all the free analysis for the weekend, and we'll be back next Friday to preview week 5 of the NFL. So as always, thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe.